Hello and welcome to Watch Me. If you have followed my channel, you would have seen the Tudor Heritage Chronograph review. So I have with me here the Tag Heuer Monaco Gulf edition watch, and this is Monaco inspired chronograph as well, and I figured it would be nice to do a quick review and also do a side-by-side comparison. So the Monaco Case is very historic and kind of classic design that came about in the 70s, original Heuer Monaco design, and the case here represents a very sort of historic and faithful rendition of that design, and there is good reason that they have stuck with it, because I feel it is really instantly recognizable and iconic in its own way. So here we have a 39 millimeter square case, and while 39 millimeters doesn't sound like much, the Monaco does tend to wear a little larger than your typical 39 millimeter round watch. And the case itself is also quite thick, and it's 15 millimeters, but keep in mind that is 15 millimeters including this really lovely beveled thick sapphire crystal that sits on top. Crystal here is clearly several millimeters thick, and it provides a kind of an effect that is unmistakable, and you don't really see many other watches have this type of a lovely, almost jewel-like effect on the edges of the crystal. So while it is still a thick watch and it does wear pretty tall, it still looks the part, and it sits quite nicely because the lug to lug is 48 millimeters or so it doesn't tend to stick out of the sides of the wrist, and you see there is enough room. Even though the lugs are themselves quite small, there is enough room for the strap to kind of drop down and fall flat. So it sits as a 48 millimeter watch and doesn't really have the strap sticking out on the sides. On to the dial itself, and we need to touch upon what makes this particular edition a little bit more special than the regular Monaco series, and the Gulf racing team colors, and it's iconic in terms of the Heuer history and their partnership with the Le Mans Gulf racing team, and the tie-in to the Steve McQueen era movies, and sort of, if you see the marketing around the Monaco, you bound to see the racing kind of images. At least for me, I like the way the colors are done on this dial. It is not easy to typically put multiple colors on a dial and still manage to keep a sense of harmony and purpose to the overall design. The red highlights, as you can see, are done very well, and they help to kind of give the racing sporty vibe. And if you look closer, the two bands actually have a texture associated with them. They're not just plain blue and orange. They have a minor texture, and that actually comes through in sunlight, and it looks kind of neat when you look at the watch closely. I find the attention to detail and kind of the finish on the hands and the markers and the dial a little better than their typical the Aqua Racer and the base Carrera type watches. It looks like they give it a little bit more attention and slightly better polish on the markers and hands, and it looks super crisp even under a loop, and that's very nice to see. Movement here is kind of set up in a way that you have the crown on the left, and this is essentially to prevent the crown digging into your wrist, because it is a big watch, which is really a nice touch. However, the interesting part because of that is you kind of have to wind the watch the other way, which is not immediately apparent, and you try to wind it and you wonder why it didn't start. It's because you are winding it the wrong way. So as you can see, we have the running seconds on the right, which has the 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60 numbers listed on it, and to the left we have the minute counter, so there's a red chronograph seconds hand, and you have a minute register that counts up to 30 minutes on the left. There is no hour totalizer on this watch. The way you set this watch again would be the other way around. So let me touch upon the movement a little bit. So this is referred to as the caliber 11 movement because of the layout change. This is basically a Celita / ETA 289 series movement with the DD module on top. So it's not exactly the vintage, the original caliber 11 movement, although they have used that moniker here because of the way that it has been laid out. You go up to move forward and you go down to move back. Onto the case profile and the case finish. So the case is quite nice in terms of the alternating finish. So the brushed sides are done pretty well with 2 layers of polishing. So they have almost like a framing mechanism around the square dial, which is not exactly square, so it's a little curved on the sides. It gives a little more personality. If it was sharp straight lines on the sides, it would have looked a little too flat and probably odd. So it's nice that they have this relief where there's mild curve to the sides, and the polishing is done on the bottom and on the top, including the lugs, and then there's a line that goes across the side as well. So this kind of helps catch light really nicely and adds pop, especially as it combines with the way that the crystal distorts and has this almost jewelry like quality to it. It's very flat and kind of neat, and it doesn't protrude to the sides, and I don't have that big a wrist. It's like low 6-inch, 6.25-inch wrist, and as you can see, the lugs just end abruptly and it still sits nicely. So let's take a quick comparison with the Heritage Chronograph. So side by side you can see that the color palette and inspiration behind the Monaco kind of theme is very strong and very similar with the 2 watches. If we were to put them kind of next to each other, it's not actually apparent, and many reviews don't quite go over this, but they are essentially the same movement. So this is from Tudor and this is from Tag, but they are both essentially using the 289 series movements. The only difference being the movement is turned around on the Heuer, and it's the regular orientation on this, but in terms of performance and what you get out of it, they're going to be basically the same. This does have longer lugs overall, and so it does wear a little on the bigger side. However, the bezel kind of helps play the dial down a little bit, and also in terms of the color pop, the Tudor is a little more subtle. It's a little more muted and matte, whereas the Heuer, the Monaco, has a little more pop, and you can see the darker blue on the left is also quite nice, and it does pick up sunlight quite well, and you are going to notice this more than the Tudor, I feel. They both have the same lug width as well. They're both 22mm lug width, so it's nice to have that because you can swap straps around quite easily, and similar racing, rally, vintage style straps work quite well with both the watches. So that's another plus, I must say. It actually is not too bad with reflections. As you can see, it's kind of subtle, the reflections, it's not too obvious. So both of them do a good job at cutting out reflections, and I honestly will say it's a tie between the two. It's gonna be very tough for me to pick, which is kind of why I have both. But do leave comments on which one you would prefer. I guess one of the things that is definitely worth mentioning is the price point. The Tudor Heritage Chronograph is significantly cheaper than the Monaco Gulf. So that does have a factor in it as well, although one could argue that this is the more iconic and more recognizable watch when compared to the Tudor Heritage. So I'm still willing to call it a tie despite that. So yeah, leave comments and let me know if you have any questions, and that's my video on the two Monaco chronograph watches. Hope you'll enjoyed the video. Thank you. Until next time. Bye bye.